Hey, how is everybody today? I'm back to my old black hat. I guess I kind of liked it. Anyway, let's go check out a new lens today. It is the Rokinon 100mm macro T3.1. Let's go check it out. So when you buy a macro lens, of course, the big word macro, meaning you can focus close up, is the thing that catches your eye. It's the reason you're buying the lens. The most important thing that you probably want to know about it is that it will focus down to 1:1. That means that what you've got in front of the lens on the back image sensor is exactly the same size. So that's a really high level of magnification. This is perfect for getting super close shots. Another really cool thing about this lens that you might not notice at first is that it has internal focus, which means the front of the lens barrel stays put. And that's really critical if you're working at very high magnification levels and you're very close to your subject. Moving that lens, especially if you're shooting living things like insects, could spook them. And spooking bees is not something I want to do. The iris and focus rings both operate smoothly. The focus turn for this lens is about 180 degrees. The focus range is mostly concentrated on the macro part. You have a lot of fine control when you're trying to focus up close. On the other hand, at distance, the control is a little more touchy because of the way they distributed the focus range. So focusing at distance can be a little bit more tricky. Still, this isn't something that I'd consider a deal breaker or a reason not to use this lens. It's absolutely perfectly great to use just as a 100mm lens, and I shot some really great stuff with it. This lens is part of Rokinon's DS Cine series, so that means that it's got a gear for the iris and focus in the same position as the rest of the lenses in the series. This makes changing lenses faster when you're using a follow focus or any sort of remote control gearing setup for focus or iris. The aperture of T3.1 is the transmission value. If this was a photo version of the lens, it'd be 2.8, and we probably were kind of wishing that it was a faster lens, that it was a T2 or maybe a little faster, but I find in practice, especially if you're shooting macro, the last thing you're probably doing is shooting it wide open. Instead, you're going exactly to the opposite end. You're at f8 or maybe f11 trying to hang on to as much depth of field as you can, because at 100mm in macro, your depth of field is a millimeter or 2 or 3, so any extra depth of field you can gain is a very welcome bonus. It seems Rokinon heard my complaints about not having depth of field markings on their lenses, and lo and behold, this lens has them, and they've been showing up on all their new lenses as well in the DS series. As far as the build is concerned, the outer body is plastic, the inner is metal. This lens isn't just for shooting macro, it's also great for shooting really tight close-ups like I did for this hunting boot spot. So one question you might have is, should you buy the Canon 100mm macro versus a Rokinon? Well, let's look at a couple things. There are two versions of the Canon. There is the non-image stabilized version, which is actually about the same price as the Rokinon. Street price could vary here or there, but they're basically the same. In this case, it's kind of a toss-up. It's whichever you prefer. You might like the built-in gears, you might like the Canon. All depends on what you like, but certainly the Rokinon is a very good optical performer. You're not going to complain about it. Now, the other Canon 100mm lens happens to be image stabilized. Now, if that's critical for what you're doing, well, even though it's a few $100s more, it kind of means that you're going to go the Canon route if image stabilization is critical for the work that you do. So check it out. This is a great value, and this might be a lens that you want to add to your collection.